All Indiana Politics is your premier source for Indiana politics, focusing on issues that matter to you.
I still want us to be the best in the Midwest.
We can't afford another lockdown.
Give the citizens of this country the relief they need.
Education in the state of Indiana remains priority number one.
In-depth, nonpartisan coverage.
We don't know exactly where the economy will be in January.
People are worried with good reason.
Exclusive interviews with Indiana's political leaders.
We have the resources here in the state of Indiana to care for those who are in need.
Expert analysis on critical legislation.
We need to reform those laws.
This recovery is going to take some time.
We've got to anticipate that there'll be a budget shortfall.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
Good Sunday morning and welcome to another edition of All Indiana Politics. I'm Phil Sanchez. Lawmakers make big changes at IU in the final hours of the session. State lawmakers voted to give the governor full control of IU's Board of Trustees without any public debate on the measure. Our government reporter, Garrett Berquist, is now talking about insight on how Republicans quietly added the provision to the state budget in the session's final hours.
The governor had already had the authority to name 6 of the 9 members of the IU Board of Trustees, but the IU Alumni Association elected the remaining 3. Governor Mike Braun will have the power to hire and fire all of the IU Board of Trustees. That language was added with no public hearings and without any of the usual legislative process. That set off furious debate overnight.
What did we witness here today? We witnessed the power of the supermajority to deny our constituents due process, to be able to use your power in this chamber, in that chamber, in this General Assembly, to lock the public out.
The measure also requires regular productivity reviews for tenured faculty and a review of which degrees are no longer being awarded. And faculty governance boards are limited to an advisory capacity only. None of those things came up at any time during session.
Well, I think the key is we have a huge investment in IU, wonderful university, and the state has an interest in being sure that that is operated in the best way. And by the way, the governor will be the one that has to answer to the people.
Did the governor ask for the language, the change to the Board of Trustees?
No, it was a collaborative effort. There's some discussions around it, and just felt like it was an appropriate change to make to have the governor, the state's largest university, have appointment from the governor.
Republicans say only a fraction of IU alums were voting for the trustees in the first place, but Democrats call it a blatant power grab.
It really does create this chilling effect on academic freedom, on democracy, on freedom of speech. And that's what I am hearing from constituents across the state.
Well, those IU provisions were part of a budget plan with $2.4 billion worth of last-minute cuts. That's after state budget analysts said Indiana will get less revenue than expected due to the turmoil caused by President Donald Trump's tariffs. The budget deal raises the cigarette tax to $2 a pack and raises other tobacco taxes. It cuts the higher education repair and rehabilitation budget and the operating expenses budget by 5% each. Local public health services will get $40 million a year instead of $100 million. The Indiana Economic Development Corporation would lose about a quarter of the budget. Not everything got cut. K through 12 education will still get a 2% funding boost each year. Medicaid funding is left untouched, as well as income tax rate reductions will go forward as planned. And income limits for school choice vouchers will be lifted as well, beginning with the 2026 and 2027 school year.
This is a very unique session for a whole host of reasons, but really proud of the work that got done. Excited about, the Senate Bill 1 and the accomplishment on reforming property taxes in our state, and then passing all the key House priority bills, dealing from everything from obviously the budget to to education, to health care, to housing, to energy. Just a really productive session, and one that we always say you never know how it's going to begin and the challenges you're going to meet throughout the process. But grateful to get to the end here with a lot of things that we're awful proud of and feel like continue to push Indiana well for success in the future.
Why give such a big cut to local public health when you just worked so hard to put that into place in the first place 2 years ago?
And on local public health, the current spend in the last fiscal year was $40 million. So that was consistent with what the current spend was. I'd also note this: there is no program that's going to be better than raising tobacco taxes to diminish people from using those types of products and helping Indiana be healthier. So we feel like those two things kind of combine.
Obviously, from the comments with regards to the language that was put in there that really wasn't vetted at all is really bad. Again, no transparency whatsoever. I think it's been extremely disappointing with regards to obviously first Senate Bill 1, then the House budget. I really thought that the Republicans would at least hold the line, keep vouchers for the next 2 years at the same level where they are currently, in light of all the economic downturn that we're about to see, and really focus on public education, where 94% of our kids in Indiana go to public schools, instead of taking the cap off, if you will. So very disappointed with that, and not a particularly good ending.
Senator Charbonneau was the lead on that local public health project 2 years ago. Does this basically undo all that hard work?
Absolutely, unequivocally no. As you heard some other people say up at the podium tonight, so we funded that to the point of $225 million in 23. $25 million, that was startup cost, so you could call it $100 million a year. This year is $40 million a year. Just about everybody across the state got cut, so that was just going to happen. But if you look across the counties of the state, there was about 45% of those funds that went unspent. Not because they weren't using it correctly or anything, but because they were rolling out programs and trying to develop them. And so when you fund this at 40 million a year, maybe they'd want a little bit more, but everybody's left this budget wanting a little bit more. But this still continues to fund the public health projects, and it's our hope that in a couple of years we'll be able to fund that at a stronger level.
Prior to the budget bill coming out, the final version of the budget bill, was there ever any indication to you at any point in session that Republicans were interested in changing who appoints the trustees to the IU board?
Never. We never heard that language. No one ever even approached me. The fact that I represent the Bloomington's campus, and it wasn't just removing the opportunity for the government or for the governor to sort of overreach and claw back IU alumni voices, but it also academic freedom. There's a provision in the budget that now creates this pathway to fire tenured employees, to require every syllabus to be posted online.
All right, coming up, Indiana's Best political team assesses the last-minute changes at IU and breaks down nearly $2.5 billion worth of budget cuts. All right, welcome back to All Indiana Politics as we welcome in two members of Indiana's Best political team, Republican Whitley Yates and Democrat Lara Beck. Lots to unpack with this session, ladies. Good to see you both. Let's begin with those last-minute changes to how IU is governed. Lawmakers slipped those changes into the budget bill during final negotiations. Whitley, should that have gone through the normal legislative process?
I mean, I think this is a part of the normal legislative process. This always happens every single cycle. There's always something that gets thrown in. And I think when you look at some of the bills that have happened during the session, and when you look at some of the things that have happened at IU, we had seen that there was an issue where I believe the administration and the trustees were clashing, specifically when it came around the protests that were happening in Dunmeadow and how those protests were handled. So I'm not surprised to see this type of action taken by the General Assembly.
Lara, why does it matter who names the IU trustees?
Well, I think when you go back to the process and you go back to the sort of the big picture about this, you do have to look at IU as one of the most, I would say, one of the major institutions in this country, or in the state, and even in the country. It's an economic engine. It's a driver for education and for growth, and particularly for our state's economy, right? And when you look at the people who have graduated from the school, you've got it gives them a voice in the university. I can't think of a university that does not have alumni representatives on it. And I think by doing it this way, I mean, you can say that this happens every session and something slides under the cover of darkness. But by doing it this way, without public debate, without public discussion, and something on this that's so consequential, particularly because of the economic impact that IU has, frankly, on the state of Indiana. When you do something that is of this great of a consequence, it doesn't look good for the supermajority. It doesn't look good for the governor, and it makes, I think it puts forth a perception that when the process is not followed, there's something wrong about it. And I think that you're going to see the layers of the onion get peeled back here, and there's going to be a much larger story about why this happened, how this happened. Right. And I think IU alums are rightfully upset.
Let's talk about some of the couple of cuts that were made to higher education. They took some of the biggest hits here. Lara, can university absorb this, possibly maybe through alumni donations?
Well, I mean, I think it depends on those universities, right? And I think, and I say this because, and Whitley will probably be at this stage of life at some point in time. You know, we're starting to look at colleges with my son, and you look at the cost of colleges, and you look at the services that are offered and the facilities that are there. I think universities have to make those decisions, but I think really what universities should really put their effort into is, frankly, making college more affordable for people. People are getting priced out of college right now, and I think anything that they can do to make college and, frankly, post-secondary training, even if it's not a 4-year degree, possible for people, that's where I think that they should really put their efforts forward. I think there's a lot of nice tos with some of these schools, but I don't necessarily know if they're have tos. And I feel like in Indiana, we have these amazing institutions, and we've got to make them more affordable and more accessible for people.
Right. Well, I think everyone can agree on that. Whitley, do campus politics play any role in this?
Absolutely, it does. And I am an alumni of the Indiana University in Bloomington. And so when I think about the cost of college, even for me when I was going and what it's going to be for my daughter, I think it's exorbitant. It's increased over 60% through the decades. And a lot of times students are coming out and not being able to participate in the job market accurately for the money that they've spent to get the degrees. And so we saw Mitch Daniels freeze the cost of tuition at Purdue. And I think that there will be some educational institutions, higher ed institutions, that are going to have to make those types of decisions. But there is a culture and a little bit of a political climate specifically for the state-supported schools. If you're going to get money from the state of Indiana, you're going to have to play ball with the state of Indiana. So seeing a more heavy-handed approach to higher education is not surprising.
So local public health departments, as you know, lost more than half of the funding that they originally were going to receive. So we heard from Speaker Houston and Senate President Pro Tem Rod Bray on that issue in the last segment. Whitley, is $120 million in savings worth the potential impact to public health?
I think we have to really look at this from the perspective of a lot of our budgets have been inflated since COVID. The truth is that America has been spending money like a trust fund baby without a job for quite some time since COVID. We've had millions of dollars, not just thrown at states, but thrown at towns and counties and health departments because of this. And so to get used to or to get comfortable with spending at that level would be asinine for us, and it would be fiscally irresponsible. So I was expecting to see cuts. However, how these departments are going to handle living the lavish life post-COVID dollars to now being reduced on a budget is going to be a balancing act for everyone.
To Whitley's point, Lara, this is still something public health departments didn't have a couple of years ago. So will they still be able to carry out most of the functions they added?
Well, I think it's important, though, that we, first of all, as we're looking to cuts in public health, We are one of the most unhealthy states in the nation. I mean, hands down, we know that. But one of the reasons how we got here and how the state government had to make a $2 billion cuts at the last minute is because of the economic uncertainty and volatility that Donald Trump has thrown us into with these tariffs. And so on the national level, you're talking about this whole make America healthy again. You've got the tariffs that have completely thrown the economy into chaos and diminished America's standing in the world. And now
Lara,
we're not even getting money out to folks. Into local health
I'm going to cut you off real quick, Laura. We got a lot to get to,
No
as
problem.
you very well know. Stick with us. We'll be right back. More from both of you, including new rules on DEI and nonprofit hospitals. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to All Indiana Politics. Still with us, of course, Democrat Lara Beck and Republican Whitley Yates. Let's turn to some other actions lawmakers took on the last day of the session. The State Office of Management and Budget will have to study what the average hospital fees are for nonprofit hospitals beginning in 2029. Any hospitals that exceed the state average would lose nonprofit status for 1 year. Laura, could this lower health care costs?
Good move. Something that the governor has been really advocating for and has been doing this long before he was even in the Statehouse. And frankly, I think this is a good opportunity because we know that costs in Indiana are among some of the highest. And it's a good way to standardize it. It's a good way to understand why your bills are different from different hospital to different hospital, different system to system. And I think it's a good first step. I think we want to make sure that rural hospitals are not impacted negatively. But even though I'm a Democrat, I do think that what Governor Braun is doing to move the needle forward on this is important. And I think anything we can do to lower healthcare costs for people in the state is a step in the right direction.
Whitley, there's a provision, as you know, in the bill that requires health insurers to report how they take lowered fees into account. Will that result in savings being passed on to the consumer?
I think that's the hope. I think what they're really trying to do in this freedom and opportunity agenda, he's been talking about this. He's been making waves when he was in Senate when it comes to healthcare costs. And so bringing that expertise to Indiana, I think is great. We don't want Hoosiers to be price gouged by hospitals, and nonprofit hospitals in particular, I believe, have a duty to make sure that their fees are transparent so that we can shop around for the best prices and the best rates. And so seeing this level of transparency added to our healthcare system is a win for Hoosiers.
Another big topic, lawmakers sent Governor Mike Braun a bill to dismantle diversity committees at public universities. It also would prohibit schools or universities from taking any action based on what it calls personal characteristics. Whitley, is there a risk that this could be interpreted, in your opinion, in a way that impacts how we teach about topics like civil rights debates?
I think that it has the implications to do that, but I'm not necessarily sure that it will. But what I do know is that there will be less discussion around diverse topics and around inclusivity. And so when we see this, and it's honestly from a top-down perspective coming all the way from the White House, so from D.C. to Indiana, these types of decisions being made to remove diversity, to remove equity, and to remove inclusion from all aspects of, a lot of times, education, government, and even some nonprofit areas, it's honestly impacting everyone quite differently, to be honest. There are a lot of my friends have lost jobs. A lot of the nonprofits I know that cater to underserved communities have lost money and aren't able to do the functions that they were able to do to serve these communities. So my question, honestly, is not about what they're taking away, but what are they adding to help the underserved communities that clearly are at the bottom of the at the bottom of the bad statistics, and how we are going to move forward as a state and being more inclusive for all people.
Yeah. So, Lara, it seems like you agree on that just by what I'm seeing you shaking your head. Also, and I'll let you respond. Also,
I can't argue with that.
Find a way around this, you think, Lara?
I'm sorry, what you wanted to know, a way around it? Is that what your question was? Will
schools be able to find a way around it?
You know, I don't know if I don't know if they will, because I think what we're seeing is at the state level, there is just almost like a vice grip, or they're trying to put a vice grip on education, particularly how our kids are taught. I mean, I think Whitley goes back to a really important conversation, and that is that there are people doing incredibly good work. And the more educated we are about diversity and inclusion, the better that we can be. and the better that our state can be, frankly. That means more kids who have opportunities. That means a better economy. It means all of those different things. But I firmly believe that so much of the conversation about diversity that is especially coming out of Washington and out of the Statehouse, it's meant to divide us. It's meant to have us talk about. It's meant for us to look at our differences and to lock in on those differences and to not give up or agree on anything. When in reality, we have so many things we have to do together as a state that we don't need more to divide us. We need more to actually unite us and get us to work more together.
Yep. I think a lot of us can agree on that. All right, Lara, Whitley, always good to see you both. Thank you so much for taking some time. Good conversation. And we will be right back. Thank you for joining us for All Indiana Politics this week. We'll be back here next Sunday morning at 9:30. And be sure to check out the All Indiana Politics podcast online at wishtv.com. Have a great rest of your weekend.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network. Watch All Indiana Politics live Sunday mornings at 9:30 on Wish TV and at wishtv.com. Subscribe to this podcast and listen weekly here on the All Indiana Podcast Network. And be sure to discover even more great podcasts at allindianapodcastnetwork.com.